Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to the second video of field operations. Alright, so this video is going to focus on the innovations part of the field operations. So I'm going to discuss these based on whether they are community-based, place-based, or person-based approaches. I think we all could agree that the methods that police use must change, and obviously innovation is part of that. It must be part of policing. Okay, so community-based approaches. These are consistent with community policing and add on to kind of what would be considered to be traditional community policing. So the first one is procedural justice and police legitimacy. One of the reasons that community policing doesn't always work is because there's a lack of police legitimacy within these communities. So police legitimacy is also one of the main reasons why the public does not have a favorable view of the police. And it's related to whether or not the public believes the police are legitimate. Okay, since the police get their authority from the people, and they cannot really be effective without the trust and the support of the people. And procedural justice is closely related to police legitimacy. So procedural justice is related to fairness. Does the public believe they were treated fairly and with respect? Okay, so common dimensions of procedural justice, that framework, are treating people with dignity and respect, giving citizens a voice during encounters, being neutral and transparent in decision making, and conveying trustworthy motives. So even if the outcome is not always what people want, they want to have been treated fairly, want to have been treated with respect. Okay, and related to these are both transparency and accountability, and those are both closely related to police legitimacy, and both of those are necessary to build trust within the community to use community-based approaches. Okay, broken windows policing is a community-based approach, and kind of the main idea of broken windows policing is that disorder and other quality of life issues can lead to larger problems, and therefore the police should be involved in maintaining order and dealing with these lower level quality of life issues within these communities. So if the police address these smaller quality of life issues or incivilities, then it in turn has an impact on the larger types of crimes such as robbery. So this approach has been quite controversial. So I'll just kind of paint you the picture of kind of what the thought process is here. So imagine you have an area, it could be a lot, it could be some area that's pretty much trashed. There's broken windows, there's trash laying around, broken bottles. So if nobody does anything about that area will most likely continue to be trashed. More trash will pile up because people think, well, this place is already trashed, so what's the big deal? More things will be broken, okay? But if the area is cleaned up, the windows are fixed, then people may be less likely to break the windows or trash the area. Okay, so that's very similar to this quality of life policing they're talking about with broken windows. Okay, so because that would be considered, this area's trash would be disorder, right? So the police are needed to maintain order. So if order is brought to that area, then that in turn keeps things from spreading. It keeps worse things from happening. Okay, I hope that makes sense. That's kind of the thought process of why they call it like broken windows policing. Okay, place-based approaches. So place-based approaches are just that. They focus on the place because, as you know, crime is not distributed equally across time and space. So for place-based approaches, things like directed patrol can be used, hotspots policing. Okay, we've already discussed both of those to a degree, so I'm not going to go into much more discussion here, but be sure to read the section on hotspots. It's pretty good stuff in there. All right, intelligence-led policing is also a place-based approach. Intelligence-led policing emphasizes using real-time crime analysis and also intelligence analysis for the deployment of your specialized units and your regular patrol officers. Okay, so you're using real-time analysis to figure out where you need to deploy your police. So if you're using real-time analysis, that means you're doing continuous analysis of things like calls for service, arrests, threats, all those things that the police would measure to determine how to best distribute your policing throughout the jurisdiction. Now, intelligence-led policing is a very centralized, top-down method of policing. Okay, so everything is in the headquarters, everything is in at the top. That's where the decision-making is made. That's where they decide what needs to happen. Now, as you remember, community policing is more of a bottom-up strategy where a lot of decision-making is done at the street level. So intelligence-led policing isn't necessarily very compatible with community policing or other strategies that have more of this kind of down or bottom-up kind of approach as opposed to the top-down. Intelligence-led policing headquarters, using the data, determines what needs to happen, when, and where. Okay, there's also predictive policing. Now, predictive policing is what the name implies. It's used to try to anticipate what will happen. Now, the police have always, to some degree, tried to guess what's going to happen, right? But in predictive policing, data is used so they can react to what's happening quickly and then also try to predict when, where, and how incidents will happen so they can be more preemptive or they can take preventive measures. Okay, so obviously, being able to predict what would happen has been the goal of law enforcement, homeland security, everybody for a long time, right? Obviously, if you could predict what's going to happen, that would be fantastic. But we're kind of to the point now where technology is making it more likely that some prediction can take place. Okay, the whole point of intelligence analysis is to try to make predictions, right? So we're getting to a point now where technology is being able to help more with that. So another aspect of predictive policing is trying to speed up how this takes place. So traditional crime analysis, which they've been doing for a while, like that takes a time, like sometimes a matter of weeks to do things. But predictive policing wants to be done much faster. Okay, it would like to be done like day by day kind of predicting. But this is really very much in its infancy. There's obviously philosophical and legal concerns. Since our criminal justice system is literally about holding people accountable for things they've done rather than what they will do, right? So how do you there's obviously legal and philosophical issues there when you're talking about what are people going to do versus what they've done, right? So they need to figure all that kind of stuff out before this really takes off. And the other kind of issue is you can pattern people to an extent, but humans are, kind of as a rule, pretty unpredictable. Now, not all the time, right? You can obviously predict when some people are going to do some things, but kind of as a general rule, like you can't always predict what humans are going to do. Okay, person-based approaches. So the final type of approach is a person-based approach. And these are used in policing because, again, only a few people account for crimes, right? Not everyone across time and space, commits crimes. Okay, crime's not spread evenly throughout a population of people, just like it's not spread across places evenly. So police like to focus on repeat or chronic offenders. Okay, and these are person-based approaches are commonly known as focused deterrence initiatives. So focused deterrence initiatives have 6 common features: selecting a particular crime problem, putting together an interagency enforcement group, identifying key offenders, framing the initiative directed at the key offenders, then matching the enforcement efforts with the supportive services and community encouragement to embrace nonviolence while challenging the street code of retaliatory violence, and communicating directly and repeatedly with offenders, letting them know they're under scrutiny. Okay, so essentially what we're talking about here is offenders are identified and they're told, like, you're on notice, like, we're watching you. And if you don't stop what you're doing, this is what's going to happen to you. Okay, so these types of programs have met with mixed results. And one of the main issues with them is they're often not sustainable due to these multi-agency task forces that they put together that are required to conduct them. Time, personnel, money, like all those things factor in on whether or not you can hold these enforcement groups together. So we talked about these approaches. So what works? Okay, what kind of these innovations, what kind of approaches work? Well, one of the issues with new innovations is always evidence, right? Evidence is often limited when you're talking about new stuff because it just hasn't been around long enough to really study it, really to test it, and see if it works. Another issue is that measuring the effects is often difficult. Okay, remember we talked about like what's quality? Well, what's effectiveness, right? How do you know if something's effective? What is it that you're measuring? And does that actually measure effectiveness? Another thing complicating this is that sometimes methods are effective one place, but not somewhere else. They may be very context, very place specific. It may depend on the departments that are involved, the personnel within those departments. What's the context on the street where they're trying to implement this stuff? There's so many factors that can impact whether or not something is effective or not. It's very hard to cookie cutter and take this innovation and apply it here. It may work great here, but it may not work at all here, even though you put it in exactly the same way, because there's other factors that have to be considered when you're talking about these things. All right, so I'm going to stop here with video number 2. Please be sure to read the chapters, complete your assignments, and as always, please let me know if there are questions.